Thank you very much for being on the Art of Intelligence podcast. We are here today with Ethan Lockshin, and he background on yourself, and then we're going to jump into a question that we're going to ask all our guests.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Yes, I currently recently started at a company called Grok with a Q, so selling semiconductor chips, which I know we'll talk more about. Before joining Grok, I spent the last year and a half selling AI agents at a company called Kubiya. And then before Kubiya, I spent about 4 years at CircleCI selling DevOps tooling to developers. And yeah, from Washington, D.C., and I currently live in Denver, Colorado.
What's the temperature out there today?
It's snowing a lot right now. So yeah.
That's so. I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask all of our guests, which is if money was no object and you could go to any vacation in the world, what would it be?
I'd probably go to Israel. My previous company had a lot of folks based out there at Kubiya when we were selling agents. Well, I love Mediterranean food, a lot of history there. So I'd probably go and just spend some time there, do some dancing and hang out.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I actually had a full trip planned for Israel to Tel Aviv right before the COVID shutdown, and it was booked and ready to go. And we were going to stay at the city hotel, and COVID stopped us from going. So that was not the most fun thing. So, to get into some more things, just to give a little background on myself and Art of Intelligence, if you're not aware, my name is Barlas, and I've been doing these types of podcasts for a couple of years now, mostly with AWS's senior partner management. And now we have created this Art of Intelligence to be a way to have bite sized, digestible information given on how AI can be used. At a couple of different AI companies, I noticed that a lot of customers, one of their biggest issues seems to be not whether they should adopt AI, not whether they should use a different tool or what kind of tools or which type of cloud they want to be on. Their biggest question is once we adopt it, what business use case will be the best one for us? And so, highlighting here those different best use cases is what I am going to try and uncover. And Ethan today, Ethan, can you give us an overall understanding of the market for AI, how you feel it's going, maybe any trends that you might be seeing?
Okay. I think that there are three main components to the stack, and I'll talk more about the application layer of that. So the three components that I think about are the semiconductor, the chip, which are powering the large language models, which are powering the applications, most notably the AI agents. There's obviously more components to those three, but that's how I like to think about the AI stack as kind of high level. In terms of the application layer, I think that's where most companies are going to get value in the immediate term. Whether you want to call it an agent, a digital worker, a co-pilot, a GPT, an assistant, these digital workers, I think, are going to be the future. And there's going to be a digital worker for every type of role, for support, for sales. And I heard Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, say that he plans on taking NVIDIA from 30,000 employees to only 50,000 employees, but 100 million digital workers. So I think when you think about these digital workers, I'll talk specifically about the digital worker that I sold for the previous year and a half. Kubiya. We built the digital worker for the DevOps engineer, that persona. And again, like I said, I think there will be workers for sales, for support. And what these workers will do is I think that you're going to be able to delegate repetitive tasks. In some cases, some people do 60% of their work can be repetitive, right? So in the case of the DevOps agent that we built, there's many tasks that are repetitive that a DevOps engineer has to deal with every day. So I'll give you 5 common ones that people were delegating to Kubiya's AI agent. The first one was Kubernetes related tasks. Scale up, scale down, roll back. The second one were CI/CD related tasks. The third one was just-in-time access and managing TTL approval, right, and revoking that. Okay, these are just tasks, right, that are very common things that a DevOps person does that now you're able to delegate to a digital worker. And there will be digital workers, like I said, for support, for sales. Uh, so I'll pause there. I'm happy to go deeper on that. But that's how I personally like to think about the stack and what the applications will do.
Wow, we can do more with less, or we can do more with what we already have on the senior level. And then on the layman, on the line manager level, a lot of people thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to take away my job. But I've heard time and time again, and I think that what you said about NVIDIA's CEO, that he's still going to increase by 20,000 employees, but he's going to have 100 million digital workers. I think it's just making our lives easier to be able to do more and focus on the things that humans are good at, which is creativity, which is relationships, which is making decisions based off of some different disparate criteria for a different type of solution. So I think that it's a very exciting thing to think about what could and possibly happen over the next couple of years. And I really enjoy that frame of thought.
Is there a specific area you'd like me to elaborate on, or you think would be
Yeah,
most
just
beneficial for the audience?
and to bring up your past employee, but when you were selling your digital workers, your agentic service for DevOps, what was the number one use case that you were seeing at that point for the DevOps?
Yeah, so the most common one was Kubernetes related tasks. So in the case of Kubiya's digital worker, it could do anything you could do with kubectl, which was the language for Kubernetes, you could do with English. Anything you could do with AWS's CLI, you could do with English. Anything you could do with Jira's JQL, you could do with English, right? So those tasks, first of all, lower the barrier to entry. So you don't necessarily need to be an expert in kubectl. And then second, it made a lot of those tasks faster. So, like I said, the most common one was related to Kubernetes. So within that, maybe you want to do a health check, right? You want to get notified, or you want to check on something, and you want to check if the cluster health, and if there's anything going on from a cluster health point of view. Historically, you'd have to log into a terminal of some sort, or a CLI of some sort, and check that, or maybe you go to an observability tool to check that, right? This was all happening through Slack. So you would just, hey, what's going on with my cluster right now? And also on the back end, it's connected to SSO, right? Okta or Active Directory. So it knows if you even have the permissions in Slack to access that cluster. So that's a whole security aspect we can talk about. But it would just run a kubectl command in the Slack thread, and it would say, hey, here's a summary of your cluster health check. And you could go deeper. You could take an action on it, right? So instead of just querying information, maybe you want to say, for this particular node or cluster or namespace, I want you to increase the CPU, right? And then it does that. And this all happened, this health check and this increase in namespace storage happened in about 10 seconds, right? So it's happening faster. It is lowering the barrier of entry to needing that skill set. And it's allowing that person to go focus on more important things. They don't need to be spending their time, you know, even if it's 5 minutes compared to 10 seconds, right? Doing a cluster health check and scaling something up. It goes both ways, right? So instead of you proactively going or reactively and having this conversation, it can be proactive, right? So you could set up a webhook, you could set up an API. So it tells you if, hey, I think you need to increase this storage, right, on the namespace. So instead of you going to it can come to you.
That's awesome. And that's where the AI kind of comes in, right? We could go into another hour conversation of the difference between AI and machine learning, but that's real where the AI is, where it's coming up with recommendations based off of where it feels like you're needing to go. So I really, really enjoy that part of the conversation. To step back for a second and because I could go into all kinds of questions about what you've seen as verticals, if there is a more of a vertical that's adopting than not, and further. But to get into a use case that you've seen in while you've been at your last company doing these agentic solutions, what what is your unique use case that you have seen that just seems like is just really cool that someone listening right now might be like, oh, I didn't really think about that. Although you've given some already, but what is that one use case that you think would everyone should know about?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because there's a couple that are beneficial. I mean, I'll give you one that's so simple, right? Security response. So there's a very large media company that was a customer of Kubiya that still is, and they actually didn't take the reactive approach. They set up a proactive approach. So what they have is they have an agent monitoring pager duty, and when there's an issue in pager duty, it sends a webhook. In this case, I believe they're doing it in Microsoft Teams, so it's not Slack. And it'll check on Google Calendar who is on call at that very moment. It'll send those folks a message individually to Slack or to Microsoft Teams with a summary of the PagerDuty incident, what's going on, and it's notifying them that they're on call. It also connects to Microsoft Teams bridge link. So it sends a Microsoft Teams bridge link to all of the people that are on call so they can hop on a quick incident response video channel so they can all start to remediate it together. That is very simple, but it is so powerful, right? Because that happens in about 30 seconds, right? And for a big media company, you can't have minutes go by, right? So being able to do all that in 30 seconds where 4 people get notified because they're the people that should get notified at that time on a Sunday night with a summary of what's going on with a Teams link so they can go on. At one point before this was implemented, people were going, VPs were saying, where's a Zoom link or where's a Teams link? Let's figure this out, right? So just being able to pull different tools together is very powerful, and being able to summarize, right, to make it conversational. And I think the last thing I'll say is all of that was able to be set up in a couple minutes, right? That use case. So there's lots of tools that do incident response and can do things like that. That's just one of the things that they did, right? One of the things that their DevOps team was responsible for. So yeah, I think that was a simple but very common and
I
powerful use
love it.
case. Yeah.
Not as many people know that I started off my second full time real career was in a security company, Armor Security. Shout out to Chris Drake, CEO. And at that point, I learned a lot about security and incident response and SOCs and how things are done. And you know what? I didn't even think really like I guess I should, but having an incident response of it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you getting alert saying, hey, reach out to Armor, or reach out to this, or reach out to any security company, and you don't really know what's going on because you got to call in, you got to get the password, you got to make sure they know who you are, and then you got to alert your team and saying, hey, by the way, did you know this is going on? Having all of that to be automated and for it to send off this message saying, hey, look, we're in a breach right now, all hands on deck, or this is a small response, we're not really sure if this is what's going on, but let's send it to these 3 guys to check it out, or let's send it to everybody based off of the level of security threat that it is. Can you tell us, maybe give us a little commercial about Grok and what makes them different, or is whatever you'd like to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm still onboarding, so definitely not an expert by means, but I'll tell you what I've learned so far. It's that the chip in the semiconductor and all of the energy that is required in the data centers, all of that infrastructure is so critical. I think a lot of times people talk about data. We don't have enough data. We've already scraped the whole web for data. And data, I think, will be an issue. It is an issue with AI scalability. But I think what's more critical at this very moment is the hardware, the infrastructure. That is the short term challenges. And what I've learned so far is that there's 2 main components to AI. There's training and there's inference. Inference just means you're using AI. And NVIDIA has created the GPU, the graphical processing unit, which up until now and still is, I think they only have a 92% market share or something like that. And all of this money and all of the focus has been, I think, on training. If you ask folks a year ago, what is the biggest challenge at the beginning of 2024? I think a lot of people would say, we need to train, we need the hardware to train. But when you think about it, do most companies train AI or do most companies use AI? I think most companies are going to use AI, not going to be, I mean, you're going to have some companies, enterprises that probably need to do some sort of training, but I think most companies are going to be using AI. So I think inference is about to explode. And what Grok has created is something called an LPU, a language processing unit. And that chip is actually much smaller and designed to be more efficient for inference. So the key, or one of the key differentiators between the GPU NVIDIA for training and the LPU Groks for inference is latency. Latency is not as much of an issue when it comes to training, right? You just need it to be humming along all of the infrastructure, and it's not a latency is not as much of a focus. When you're using AI agents or digital workers or AI applications, inference, you don't want latency, right? The whole experience is you want it to be snappy and fast. So we have Grok has created the best chip for inference. And I think inference is about to explode. I think we're going to be hearing that word much more. And I'm really excited to have a seat on the rocket show.
Wow, you explained that so well. I'm sure Grok's going to be very proud of you. That's a really great use case. And I think you're right. I think that a lot of companies are looking not only on how to use what they're doing, but the question has always been, how do we monetize that as well? Like, how do you monetize AI? And I think the inference is how you monetize it, right? Like, I'm not talking for IT companies or software companies, but like regular Joe Blow, Canadian Tire, or, how do we monetize the fact that, Winn-Dixie is, how do we make it so that customers are buying better, more, faster? So I think inference is a really good point that you're making, and I hope the best for Grok. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we log off?
No, I think actually, yeah, I guess what I would say to everyone is just start using it. And what I mean to be more specific is start using Chat GPT. Just use it more. If I were to give one app to use, I would actually use the app Perplexity. I love Perplexity. It's my favorite
Ooh,
AI application.
I hadn't
I
used it yet.
Oh, it's awesome. It's basically a new Google, and I think it's better than Google. I think, yeah. So I would just, whether it's there, all of these, you've probably heard of Claude and Chat GPT, and Perplexity. Like, just pick one of those three. I'd recommend starting with Perplexity, but just pick one of those three and just start using it. Use it 10 times a day. When you're with your friends and you want to know what movie that Tom Cruise played in 2004 when he was a sports agent, ask it to ChatGPT or to Perplexity or Claude. When you have a question about your health, what are these bumps, on my arm? Ask it to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude. I just can't emphasize enough, AI isn't going to replace humans in the short term. Humans who know AI replace humans in the short term. So be a human that knows AI. And a great way to start that is to just chat GPT, Claude, or Perplexity and to just start using it every day.
What a great message. Good luck on the new endeavor. We really appreciate everything that you're doing in the AI community, and stay tuned for more Art of Intelligence podcast, folks. Thanks.